She sent the Alpha King an anonymous gift for Christmas. He roared, "Track her scent. Bring her to me." The castle walls, high and strong, seemed untouchable, yet inside them, whispers of fear and awe drifted through the grand halls. This was the kingdom of Alpha King Kale, a ruler whose name alone could silence a crowd or command obedience from the fiercest warrior. Kale sat alone in his private chamber that evening, the fire casting long shadows across the room. The winter solstice had arrived, and while the palace glittered with candles and decorations, his mind remained restless. Many feared him, many obeyed him. Few dared to look into his eyes and see the loneliness that lay beneath. A soft knock at the chamber door pulled him from his thoughts. "Enter," he commanded, his voice low and steady. A messenger, young and nervous, stepped inside, carrying a small, perfectly wrapped box. Its silk shimmered faintly, as though the threads held some magic of their own. No name, no seal, just the gift itself, left at the palace doors without explanation. Kale's sharp eyes narrowed. "Who sent this?" The messenger shook his head. "No one left their name, Your Majesty." "Only the gift." Kale took the box in his large hands, feeling the slight warmth radiating from it. He placed it on the table and carefully untied the silk ribbon. Inside lay a delicate object, a carved wooden pendant in the shape of a snowflake, small but intricate, with tiny runes etched into its edges. A faint glow pulsed within it, almost like a heartbeat. Kale's heart skipped a beat. Not from fear, he had faced monsters, curses, and betrayal, but from the strange pull this gift had on him. He did not know the sender. He did not know why they had chosen him. And yet, he felt something awaken within. "Magic," he murmured, tracing the runes with a finger. His alpha senses, always sharp, tingled as though the object were alive. "Who dares send me this?" The messenger swallowed hard, uneasy under Kale's piercing gaze. It seems personal, Your Majesty. Only someone who knows you could make such a thing." Kale stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the stone floor. His anger rose, but not like before. This was not mere annoyance, this was a challenge. "Track her scent," he ordered, voice low and dangerous. "Bring her to me. Whoever dares send a gift to the Alpha King will pay for their boldness, or they will be mine to command." The messenger bowed quickly and left, leaving Kale alone with the strange pendant. For hours he studied it, turning it over in his hands. The glow grew faint in the darkness of the chamber, and he felt a connection he could not explain. His chest tightened, his breath caught. He had ruled for many years, feared and respected by all, yet never had he been drawn to someone as he was drawn to the unknown giver of this gift. Far away, hidden within the snowy woods at the edge of the kingdom, Lady Alara watched the citadel through a spyglass. Her breath fogged in the cold air, and she hugged her cloak tightly around her shoulders. She had sent the gift herself, choosing the winter solstice for its symbolism of endings and beginnings. She admired Kale from afar, knowing tales of his strength, his command, and his cruelty. But she also knew stories that few spoke aloud. The man beneath the armor, the king who carried loneliness like a weight. Her heart had compelled her to act. The pendant was not just a gift, it was a piece of herself, a small enchantment that carried a trace of her essence. It was her way of reaching him without being seen, a whisper in the cold night. But now she felt the tension of her own courage. She knew Kale would hunt for her as he commanded. She had not meant to challenge him, only to connect. And yet she could not turn back. She had to see what would come of her small act. Back in the citadel, Kale paced the chamber, the pendant clutched tightly in his fist. Every alpha instinct screamed at him. He should know the source. He should find the bold soul who dared send something to him. And yet, another part of him, a part long hidden, whispered of curiosity, of longing, of something he could not name. "Who are you?" he whispered to the empty room. "And why do you call me so?" The fire crackled in response, as if the room itself awaited the answer. But of course there was none. Kale called his hunters the fiercest trackers in the kingdom. "Bring her to me," he repeated, his voice sharp as the winter wind. "No one hides from the Alpha King. I will find her, I will see her." The hunters bowed, eager but wary. None had faced the challenge of tracking someone whose presence was as subtle as a snowflake in a blizzard, someone who had already hidden her scent with skill and craft. As they departed into the night, Cale returned to his chamber, staring at the pendant once more. The glow seemed to pulse faster, as if reacting to his emotions. He could feel it stirring something inside him, a tension he had not felt in years, anticipation, longing, a need he could not yet name. Outside in the silent woods, Alara moved cautiously. The snow muffled her footsteps, but she knew the hunters would come. She had prepared small wards, traps meant not to harm but to mislead and confuse. She was clever, and she had studied the ways of magic and subtlety. Yet her heart raced. She had never faced a king, especially not one like Cale. She paused atop a hill, looking toward the distant citadel. Through the falling snow, the glow of torches marked the hunter's passage. She whispered a quiet prayer to the old spirits, asking for guidance, for protection. Back in the palace, Cale's mind wandered even as he paced. The pendant seemed almost alive in his hand, as though it carried her heartbeat, her essence, her will. He wondered briefly if he had ever felt so drawn to anything or anyone before. And the thought both thrilled and frightened him. Hours passed. The fire dimmed. The castle grew quiet, but Cale could not rest. He had spent his life in command, in control, in solitude. Now, for the first time, he felt like a man standing at the edge of something he could not conquer with strength or fear. The night deepened, and the snow fell heavier, blanketing the kingdom in silence. Cale's alpha senses twitched. He smelled something faint on the air, something unusual, fleeting. A hint of frost and fire, delicate yet undeniable. His heart raced. He clenched the pendant in his hand. "She is close," he whispered, voice low but fierce. "She is near, and I will find her." At that very moment, Alara, hidden behind a grove of frosted pine, felt the shift. A tug at her spirit, a stirring in the air. She had left traces, careful traces, to guide him if he pursued. And now, she knew, he had begun to follow. Her pulse quickened, a mix of fear and exhilaration. She had wanted to reach him, to make him feel something beyond power and fear. But now, the hunter had become the man herself, and the chase had begun. Cale stepped outside the citadel, the cold air biting his skin. The pendant hung around his neck now, its glow faint but steady. The snow crunched under his boots, and he moved silently, a shadow among shadows. The scent on the wind was faint but unmistakable, and he followed it with the precision of a predator who had tracked many prey, but never like this. The night deepened around him, and the wind whispered secrets he could not yet understand. The forest awaited, dark and silent, holding the promise of danger, magic, and the unknown. Somewhere in the trees, Alara paused and looked back at him, not knowing if he would find her but feeling a strange thrill at the thought. She had sent the gift, and now the Alpha King was moving through her world, drawn by something she could not name. And in the citadel, a roar echoed through the halls, deep and commanding, shaking even the bravest hearts. "Track her scent. Bring her to me." The hunt had begun. And in that moment, neither of them knew how their fates were bound together by magic, by longing, and by a silent, unseen thread that neither could resist. The night stretched on, cold and silent, as snowflakes drifted lazily from the black sky. The forest outside the citadel of Valemire was a world of shadows and whispers. Cale moved through it like a shadow himself, boots crunching on frozen leaves and snow. The pendant around his neck glimmered faintly, its soft pulse guiding him. He was no stranger to the woods. He had hunted men and beasts alike. But this hunt was different. The prey was clever, elusive, and dangerous in a way that no ordinary thief could ever be. His alpha senses hummed with anticipation. This was no ordinary pursuit. It was a test of his patience, his power, and something far deeper he did not yet fully understand. Alara had prepared carefully. The forest was her ally. The snow, the trees, even the wind itself could be shaped subtly by her magic. Small wards hid her tracks, illusions misled the hunters, and whispers of enchantment lingered in the night air. She was a scholar of old spells and subtle magics, and she had anticipated that Kale's hunt would be relentless. Yet she did not fear him. Not entirely. She paused atop a small hill, the wind biting her cheeks. The glow from the citadel's torches shone faintly in the distance. She could sense him moving through the forest, closer with every step. Her pulse quickened. This was the moment when the hunter and the hunted would begin a game neither could escape. Kale followed the faint scent of frost and smoke, lingering on the air like a memory. It was subtle, nearly imperceptible to anyone but him. He stopped now and then, listening. The forest seemed alive, watching him, testing him. The snow whispered beneath his boots, carrying hints of movement, a shadow here, a branch that had been disturbed. He was patient. He would not fail. As he approached a narrow path flanked by ancient pines, Kale paused. Something was off. The air shimmered faintly, a trick of light and magic that was not natural. He narrowed his eyes. Ilara, he murmured to himself, though he had never met her. The name came unbidden. The pendant pulsed against his chest. It was a connection, invisible yet undeniable. Ilara watched from above. She had created a small trap, nothing to harm him, only a subtle shift of perception. Snow shifted unnaturally, creating the illusion of movement on the path. A small charm she had placed on a branch glimmered with faint blue light. It was meant to confuse, to test him, and perhaps to slow him just enough to measure his intentions. Kale did not falter. He stepped carefully, ignoring the illusions. Each movement was deliberate. His alpha instincts, honed through years of command and battle, guided him past the false signs. Still, he could feel her presence just beyond reach, a whisper on the wind, a heartbeat carried in the cold night air. He stopped suddenly. A figure darted between the trees, fleeting like smoke. His pulse quickened. The chase had truly begun. He did not run, but his gaze followed the movements. Every shadow, every flicker of snow could be her. Ilara's heart raced. She could feel him near, moving through her carefully crafted defenses. She had expected fear, perhaps anger, but there was something else in him, a fascination, a desire, a strange respect. Her magic was strong, but she had never anticipated the depth of his perception. Kale paused again, sensing the faint trace of her magic. He breathed in the cold air, eyes narrowing. The faint scent of frost and fire, the same scent that had led him from the gift, was here. It was subtle, almost hidden, but it pulled at him, demanded attention. He moved closer, stepping over frozen roots and fallen branches. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind softened, carrying only the faintest sounds of movement. Kale's senses were sharp, every nerve alert. He did not speak. He did not need to. Ilara watched him, her pulse a drumbeat of anticipation. She had never seen anyone move like this. Strong, silent, unyielding, but also cautious, measured, patient. Not once had he been reckless, not once had he underestimated her. She decided it was time for another test. Slowly, she stepped onto the path, leaving her handprints faintly in the snow. A charm she had placed nearby shimmered, creating the illusion of a second figure moving deeper into the woods. It was a simple test. She wanted to see if he would follow the magic or if he would recognize the true trace. Kale's eyes glinted. He had seen this before. A simple trick, but clever. His gaze flicked to the shimmer, then back to the subtle, almost invisible trail. He stepped lightly, ignoring the false magic. The pendant pulsed warmer against his chest, a reminder of the invisible bond. "Ilara," he whispered again, and for the first time he wondered if she could hear him. Perhaps she could, somewhere deep in the forest. She did not respond. Instead, she stepped further, moving between the trees like a ghost. Her breath was calm, even as her heart raced. She had hoped for this, a challenge, a test of skill, and perhaps, if fate allowed, a chance to see him up close. Kale's movements were careful, deliberate. Each step brought him closer, each breath a measure of patience. His alpha instincts guided him past her illusions, past her wards, past the small magical tricks she had left in the snow. And still she was always just beyond his reach, teasing him, drawing him deeper into the forest. Hours passed. The moon rose high, its silver light cutting through the trees. The snow reflected the light, casting the forest in a pale glow. Kale's patience never faltered. He moved like a shadow, silent and deadly, his eyes never leaving the subtle traces that only he could sense. Alara stopped briefly beside an ancient oak, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. She knew he was near. She could sense it in the rhythm of the forest, in the faint crackle of magic lingering in the air. He was close but not reckless. He respected the challenge. And in that she felt something stir, curiosity, excitement, perhaps even admiration. Kale emerged from the trees a short distance away, his eyes scanning the forest floor. The faint traces of magic shimmered like distant stars. His hand rested on the pendant at his chest as if it guided him. He did not speak. He did not call out. He moved with purpose, silent, determined, unyielding. Suddenly, a swirl of frost erupted in the clearing ahead, blinding him momentarily. A soft laugh echoed through the trees. Alara stepped lightly onto a mound of snow, the charm she had prepared for this moment flickering and disappearing. Kale's eyes narrowed. He could feel her, not just see her. Her presence was near, woven into the very air around him. He advanced slowly, cautious but determined. Alara's heart raced. She had expected him to be strong but not so perceptive, not so relentless. She had hoped to test him, to challenge him, but now she felt something else, something she had not anticipated. A pull, a connection, a strange warmth in the cold night that seemed to draw them closer, even as they remained apart. Kale stepped into the clearing, his eyes sweeping the trees. He could feel her, like a heartbeat in the snow, just out of reach. He moved closer and the pendant pulsed stronger as if urging him forward. "Show yourself," he said quietly, his voice low but commanding. "I will not be denied." For a moment the forest was silent. Only the wind moved, rustling the branches. Then, as if answering him, Alara stepped from behind a tree, her cloak brushing the snow. She did not speak. She did not run. She simply watched, her eyes locked with his. Kale studied her carefully. She was smaller than he expected, yet there was a strength in her posture, a confidence in her gaze that challenged him. She was clever, cautious, and clearly not afraid, qualities that intrigued him even more. "You are clever," he said softly, "and bold. You knew I would find you." Alara did not respond immediately. Instead, she circled slowly, keeping a careful distance, testing his reaction. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of defiance and curiosity. "And yet," Kale continued, "you still leave traces. You want me to follow. Why?" Alara's lips curved into a faint smile. "Perhaps I am curious as well," she said. "Perhaps I want to see how far you will go." Kale's chest tightened. That single sentence carried more than it seemed: defiance, challenge, invitation. He took a step closer. "Do you know what you have done?" he asked, his voice low and intense. "No one leaves a gift for the Alpha King and expects to remain unseen." "I did not expect to be caught," Alara admitted, her voice steady. "But I did not expect you to follow so patiently." Kale's eyes softened for a brief moment. The pendant pulsed warmly against his chest. Something unspoken hung in the air between them: tension, curiosity, longing. Neither fully understood it yet, but both could feel it, a thread connecting them despite the chase, the forest, the cold. Suddenly, a branch snapped in the distance. Both of them froze. Kale's instincts sharpened, Alara's heart raced. She had anticipated danger but never fully imagined how precise he would be. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The game had changed. They were no longer simply hunter and hunted. Something else was at play, something neither could name. Kale stepped closer and the pendant's glow brightened. He sensed her heartbeat, her hesitation, her courage. And in that moment, he realized that this pursuit was no longer about dominance. It was about understanding, about connection, about a bond that neither could ignore. Alara met his gaze, and for the first time she felt seen, truly seen. Not as a shadow, not as a puzzle, not as a trick, but as herself. The snow fell silently around them, thick and soft. The forest watched. The night held its breath. And in that quiet, dangerous, magical moment, the game continued, not with fear or anger, but with something deeper, something that neither had yet dared to name. Kale did not speak again. He simply moved closer, drawn by the pull of the pendant, the faint trace of her magic, and the unspoken connection that had begun to bind them together. Alara held her ground, heart racing, waiting, wondering how far he would follow, and what this night would truly bring. The hunt had begun, but this was more than a pursuit. It was the start of something neither of them could yet understand, a bond forged in snow, magic, and the quiet tension of two powerful souls drawn inexorably toward one another. The first light of dawn barely touched the kingdom of Valemire when Kale returned to the citadel. The forest still carried the scent of frost and magic, a lingering trace of Alara's presence. He had followed her through the night, past illusions, traps, and faint trails, yet she had always remained just out of reach. Back inside the castle walls, the halls were alive with preparations for the winter solstice ball. Candles glimmered in crystal holders, drapes shimmered with frost patterns, and the scent of pine and roasted spices filled the air. The nobles had arrived, eager to celebrate the season, yet Kale's mind was elsewhere. The memory of her, Alara, clung to him like a shadow. He walked through the grand hall, his eyes scanning every corner. His alpha instincts were on high alert. She had left subtle traces in the forest, but here, in the midst of so many people, finding her would be far more difficult. And yet he felt certain she would be here. Somehow she could not resist. Alara, for her part, had prepared carefully. Disguised as a guest of noble lineage, she moved gracefully through the ball, her eyes scanning the crowd. Her heart raced each time she caught sight of Kale. He was always at the center of attention, commanding every gaze, yet she could feel him looking for her. Every step she took, every bow, every laugh, it was a delicate game of visibility and concealment. Kale's eyes flicked across the ballroom, sharp and searching. His senses were attuned to more than the surface of things. He could feel the subtle magic lingering in the air, a trace of warmth amidst the glitter and perfume. He did not know what she had planned, but he sensed her. She was close, and soon, he thought, the mystery would end. The music swelled and nobles danced, their gowns and cloaks shimmering like snow in the candlelight. Kale moved through the crowd with a predator's grace, his gaze fixed on the faintest trace of magic, the smallest hint of movement. And then he saw her, Alara, standing near a balcony, her posture composed, her eyes scanning the room as though searching for someone. Their eyes met. The world seemed to narrow around them, the music fading into silence, the chatter of the nobles a distant murmur. The pendant around Kale's neck pulsed warmly, and for the first time he felt something beyond curiosity. There was a connection here, invisible yet undeniable, and it drew him forward. Alara's heart skipped a beat. She had expected this moment, yet she had not imagined the intensity of his gaze. The Alpha King was powerful, commanding, and dangerous, but there was something else in his eyes now. Fascination, interest, and a hunger that was not just for power. Kale approached her slowly, each step measured, deliberate, respectful even in its intensity. She did not step back, though her fingers brushed her cloak nervously. The crowd seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a world suspended between magic and silence. "You are bold," Kale said quietly, his voice low but clear, "to come here to challenge me in my own hall." Alara's lips curved into a small, confident smile. "And you are patient," she replied. "To follow, to seek, to endure the game I set." Kale studied her, noting the subtle strength in her stance, the intelligence in her gaze, the calm courage beneath the surface of nerves. "You are clever," he said, "and dangerous. You knew I would find you, and yet you came willingly into my hall." Alara met his gaze without flinching. "I did not come to be captured," she said softly, "but to see if you would understand, to see if you could see me truly." The pendant around Kale's neck pulsed warmer as though echoing her words. He realized that this was more than a hunt, more than a chase. This was a meeting of minds, of wills, of hearts. Something had begun between them, fragile yet undeniable, and it could not be ignored. Kale extended a hand, not as a command, but as an invitation. "Then show me," he said. "Show me who you are, beyond the gift, beyond the magic, beyond the forest. Let me see you." Alara hesitated for a moment, then placed her hand in his. The touch was brief, yet it carried a weight of understanding and trust. A spark passed between them, something that neither could name, yet both recognized. Before they could speak further, a sudden commotion erupted near the entrance of the hall. Shadows shifted unnaturally, and a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing some of the candles. The nobles murmured in alarm, fear flickering in their eyes. Kale's alpha senses immediately tensed. The forest had taught him patience, stealth, and caution, but this was different. The shadows moved with intent, dark and unnatural, and he knew at once that danger had come to his doorstep. Alara felt it too. Her magic tingled, the wards she had studied in secret flaring in response to the threat. She had not expected this, but she did not falter. The presence of the Alpha King at her side was both terrifying and comforting. Kale stepped forward, placing himself between the threat and the guests. His eyes swept the hall, analyzing, calculating. He could feel the danger in the air, the pull of something old, powerful, and cruel. The shadows were not ordinary. They were remnants of a curse long forgotten, lingering at the edges of the kingdom. Alara moved closer, subtly weaving her own magic to strengthen the defenses of the hall. "They are tied to the curse," she whispered to him. "The one your ancestors tried to banish. It has returned." Kale nodded, understanding immediately. The Alpha King had faced many enemies, but magic of this nature required more than strength. It required strategy, precision, and trust. He glanced at her, and for the first time he did not see a stranger or a target. He saw an ally. Together they moved through the hall, Kale's presence commanding attention, Alara's magic subtly guiding their movements. The shadows advanced, but they could not touch the bond that was forming between them, a bond of mutual understanding, of respect, and a spark of something far deeper. The first shadow lunged at a guest, and Kale struck with swift precision, neutralizing the threat. Alara followed, her hands moving gracefully, shaping magic that pushed back the darkness, weaving barriers and illusions that protected the people around them. In that moment, the dance of power and trust began. Kale relied on her guidance, her understanding of the curse, her cleverness in battle. She relied on his strength, his speed, his unwavering focus. They moved together not as hunter and hunted, but as two forces in harmony against a common danger. The guests watched, awe and fear in their eyes. They could see the connection, even if they did not understand it. The Alpha King and the mysterious woman who had appeared so boldly in their hall were no longer merely participants in a ball. They were warriors, partners, bound by necessity and the unspoken pull between them. After what felt like hours, the shadows finally began to retreat, dissolving into the night from whence they came. The hall was damaged, candles flickering, yet the people were safe. Kale stood tall, chest heaving, eyes searching for Alara. She emerged from the shadows, her cloak dusted with snow that had been carried in by the cold wind, her eyes bright with exertion and something else, exhilaration, relief, and a flicker of something tender. Kale approached her, the pendant around his neck glowing softly. He reached out, not in command but in connection. "You saved more than me," he said quietly. "You saved them all, and yet you saved me as well." Alara's lips curved into a small smile. "And you saved me," she replied. By coming to find me, by trusting me, by seeing me. For a moment they simply stood, hand in hand, eyes locked. The storm of shadows had passed, but the storm within each of them was only beginning. The hunt had ended, but something else had begun. A bond forged in magic, courage, and the quiet understanding of two souls meeting across a distance that had once seemed insurmountable. Kale's voice softened, almost a whisper, carrying a rare vulnerability. You are no longer a mystery, Alara. You are something more, and I do not know what to do with that yet. Alara nodded, understanding. Neither do I, she admitted. But perhaps that is part of the journey, to learn what we can be together. The first light of the sun touched the balcony outside, painting the hall in pale gold. The world seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the moment. The Alpha King and the mysterious woman who had challenged him, who had drawn him into a night of pursuit, danger, and magic, now stood together, not as hunter and hunted, but as equals, partners, and perhaps something more. And yet, even in that moment of quiet triumph, neither could ignore the faint trace of movement at the edge of the citadel. Shadows lingered still, a reminder that the curse was not gone entirely, that danger and magic were never far from their world. Kale tightened his grip on the pendant. His gaze swept the horizon, sharp and unwavering. "This is not over," he said quietly. Alara nodded, her hand in his firm anchor. "No," she agreed, "but we face it together." And so, in the golden light of dawn, a bond was formed, one forged in pursuit, in magic, in trust, and in the quiet, undeniable pull of two hearts drawn toward each other, even amidst shadow and uncertainty. The dance between them was just beginning. The citadel of Valemere stood silent under a sky heavy with snow, its spires piercing the gray morning clouds. Inside, the halls were scarred from the shadows attacked the previous night, but the kingdom had survived. For Kale, the Alpha King, the danger had been a revelation. He had realized that power alone could not protect his people. He needed more: strategy, trust, and allies who could match his strength. And now, beside him, was the woman who had challenged him in ways no one else ever could. Alara. The memory of the winter solstice ball and the shadows that had stormed the hall lingered in their minds. Though the immediate threat was gone, Kale knew the curse had not been fully banished. It was an ancient darkness, tied to the royal line, lingering like a shadow in the corners of the kingdom. He had fought it before, but never with someone like Alara, someone clever, powerful, and unafraid. "Alara," he said quietly as they walked through the damaged hall, "the shadows were only the beginning. The curse still has strength. If we do not act, the kingdom will suffer again." Alara nodded, her eyes steady. "I know," she replied, "and we will face it together. We can combine your strength with my magic. Together we can end it for good." Kale studied her, noting the courage in her voice. She was not just brave, she was fearless in a way that demanded respect. He realized that she was no ordinary woman. She was extraordinary, and in that realization, something inside him shifted. He had always ruled with dominance, with strength, but he now understood the value of partnership, of trust, of connection. The Alpha King and the mysterious woman walked to the citadel's highest tower, where the royal archives contained records of old curses, spells, and forgotten magic. Here, they could trace the origin of the shadowed force that had attacked the ball. Dusty tomes and faded scrolls lined the walls, filled with knowledge lost to most. "Alara," Kale said, opening a book that radiated faint magic, "this curse, it was placed centuries ago. A dark power meant to control the kings of Valemere. It has lingered through generations, waiting for weakness." Alara traced her fingers along the runes in the book, murmuring quietly, "It's clever. It feeds on fear, anger, pride. It grows stronger whenever it senses division. That is why it has lasted so long." Kale's eyes darkened. "Then we cannot fight it with force alone. We must face it together as equals, without fear, without pride. We must be one in purpose if we are to succeed." Alara met his gaze. The connection between them had grown over the night through pursuit, danger, and trust. She could feel it now, a bond that pulsed like a heartbeat between them, subtle but undeniable. "Then let us begin," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. The two moved to the castle's central courtyard, where ancient stones had once been used for rituals of power. Snow covered the ground, but faint traces of old magic glimmered beneath the ice. Alara knelt, tracing runes into the frozen surface with careful precision. Kale stood behind her, placing his hands lightly on hers, guiding her movements, lending strength and focus. The ritual required not only magic but understanding. Kale's strength stabilized the energies, while Alara's spells wove through the air, countering the remnants of the curse. The combination of his alpha power and her subtle magic created a harmony neither could have achieved alone. "Steady," Alara whispered. "The curse will resist. It will try to feed on fear. Do not falter." Kale's jaw tightened. "I do not fear," he said. "Not while you are here." Her eyes softened briefly. The first flicker of vulnerability passed between them, a rare and delicate moment. "Then we are stronger than it imagined," she murmured. The shadows stirred in the corners of the courtyard, dark and restless. The curse sensed the threat, feeding on memories of doubt, mistrust, and past failures. Kale and Alara moved in unison, their focus absolute. Every chant, every movement, every connection strengthened their combined power. Suddenly, a surge of energy erupted from the frozen stones, casting light into the gray sky. The shadows hissed and recoiled, their form wavering. The curse was resisting, but the bond between Kale and Alara was stronger. Together, they became a force neither had imagined, their hearts and minds synchronized, their power intertwined. "Alara," Kale said, his voice low but intense, "we can end this. But I need you to trust me completely, no holding back, no fear." Alara's eyes met his. "I trust you," she replied, "and you can trust me." That single affirmation solidified the ritual. The light from the stones grew brighter, the cold wind whipping around them, carrying away the lingering darkness. The shadows shrieked, twisting and struggling against the growing force, but they could not overcome the unity of Kale's strength and Alara's magic. With a final surge, the curse shattered. A brilliant light filled the courtyard, snowflakes glimmering like tiny stars. The shadows dissolved, leaving only the calm, quiet air of a kingdom reborn. The stones glowed briefly before fading, their magic spent, their work complete. Kale and Alara stood in silence, chest heaving, eyes locked. They had faced the darkness together and emerged victorious. But beyond the triumph, there was something else, a quiet recognition of the bond they now shared. "You were incredible," Kale said, his voice softer than she had ever heard. "Not just with your magic, with everything. Courage, intelligence, heart. You are," he paused, struggling to find words. "You are extraordinary." Alara's lips curved into a gentle smile. "And you are more than I imagined, Kale. Strong, yes, but also patient, thoughtful, capable of more than mere strength." For a long moment they simply stood, the snow falling softly around them, their hands brushing together, warmth flowing between them in the cold air. Neither needed words. They had proven their power, their trust, their connection. They had faced the curse and in doing so had faced themselves. Kale's voice broke the silence, low and steady. "Alara, you were never just a gift. You were my choice. And I choose to stand with you, not because I command it, but because I want to." Alara felt her heart quicken. She had feared him, had feared the power of the Alpha King. Yet now she realized that the man beside her was not the legend of stories, nor the tyrant whispered about in fear. He was someone capable of trust, of respect, of partnership. And for the first time she allowed herself to hope. "I choose you too," she whispered, her voice trembling just slightly. "Not because I am bound by fear or magic, but because I want to." The snow continued to fall, soft and quiet, covering the courtyard in a blanket of white. The sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the scene, reflecting in the glimmering snow. Two figures stood in the center, an alpha king and the woman who had challenged him, guided him, and ultimately healed a part of his heart he had long thought lost. The kingdom had survived, the curse had been broken, and in the quiet aftermath a new beginning had been forged, not only for Valemere but for Kale and Alara. Their bond was not born of magic alone, nor of necessity, nor of fear. It was born of courage, trust, and the quiet, undeniable pull of two hearts that had found each other across shadow and snow. Yet, even as they stood together, victorious, Kale's sharp gaze swept the horizon. There were still traces, faint hints of lingering darkness, whispers of magic that had not fully vanished. The kingdom was safe for now, but vigilance was required. Alara noticed his alertness. "There is always more to face," she said softly. "But whatever comes, we face it together." Kale nodded, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "Together," he agreed. And so, in the light of the morning, with snow sparkling like crystals around them, a new chapter began for Valemere, and for two souls who had found each other in a world of shadows, magic, and challenges. The Alpha King and the woman who had once sent an anonymous gift now stood united, not just as allies but as equals, as partners, and as something far deeper, something neither had yet named, but both understood. The wind carried the faint echo of the past, but the present was theirs. The bond forged in the hunt, strengthened in the shadows, and sealed in courage and trust, would guide them through whatever the future held. The kingdom had survived. They had survived. And together they would face whatever came next, side by side. The first snow of a new year fell softly, pure and untouched. Kale reached for Alara's hand, their fingers entwined, hearts beating in quiet synchrony. "Whatever comes," he whispered, "we will face it as one." "Yes," she replied, her voice steady, warm, and full of hope. "As one." The sun rose higher, bathing the citadel in golden light. Two figures stood together against the backdrop of a kingdom reborn, a bond forged in courage, trust, and the quiet, unbreakable strength of love. And for the first time in many years, Kale allowed himself to hope, not as a king but as a man.